Alright, a lot of you were really interested in Fairfolk content. You're gonna get it. Alright, I got this book by Nancy Arrowsmith. It's actually a lot larger than I expected, and I also have another book by Catherine Briggs, I believe her name is, and that was a much more expensive book, but both Arrowsmith and Briggs are really good folklorist thing. It's mostly just to have the academic backing for the videos. So we're gonna say like every Friday, call it Fairfolk Friday or something. I'm gonna probably choose a random page and do a video. And if it differentiates anything from family lore, I will state so in the video. But, you know, gives you a chance to know both sides without just taking my word for it, which was something I was a little concerned about. But again, Fridays I have a thing now. Thank you for watching. I've got more mail. My other book came in yesterday, of course. But yeah, Encyclopedia of Fairies by Catherine Briggs. This is quite a hefty book. And as you can see, I got it in, you know, less than new condition. I don't think you can get this book new, actually, but I'm not entirely sure. Briggs is a really good folklorist to reference because of her references. Not only is she was well studied, she passed in 1980, I believe, but she went to basically what would be the only primary sources around at the time. She went to the people actually telling these stories hereditarily. First Fairfolk Friday, let's do this! Today we're going to start from this book, random page. Had to go back a page for the actual identification, but the Witchlin, which seems to be a type of fairy from Germany and Austria. So we're already outside of my general area of expertise, but they appear to be basically a form of, you know, more Germanic house sprite. And as house sprites, they tend to, you know, if you're in good relations with them, they'll do housework. And they seem to have, specifically being described as having tireless energy, but they're also tricksters. They'll feed the animals and everything like that. And they'll do that until the job is done, but if they get bored, more than likely your cow's tails are going to be tied together, and a bunch of other such things. Also, be careful if they tickle you. Their hands are cold. This is their artwork. I'm assuming Witchel would be one and Witchlin would be plural. Like other forms of Fairfolk, they generally don't like being paid in their services, especially with clothes, but apparently the Witchels will take them if left quietly in their favorite spots. They are said to live in Austria, Switzerland, and southern Germany in the woods. They'll sometimes live in houses in southern meadows, sometimes in caves and in barns, which, you know, that all makes sense for the most part. They are viewed as domesticated earth Fairfolk. So take that as you will. But yeah, it's really interesting. You can draw certain comparisons, but I try not to synchronize too many of the Fairfolk because that leads to a lot. But certainly interesting. Hope you join me next time. It's Friday again, so it's another Fairfolk Friday, and today we're gonna talk about a cousin of the leprechauns, the Chloroshon. Chloroshons are often confused with leprechauns because they look relatively similar, however they're generally differentiated because they wear red tones as compared to generally your earth tones from a leprechaun. Because of this confusion, many people will say that leprechauns get drunk. That stereotype actually comes from the Chloroshons. While leprechauns are generally very diligent shoemakers, the Chloroshons can have a wide variety of hobbies and occupations. Generally, though, they're getting drunk. So, for the most part, you're gonna catch them brewing. They share a lot of the same abilities with a leprechaun, and if you confuse a leprechaun for a Chloroshorn, you've angered the leprechaun rather greatly. Remember to lock your wine cellars. It's another Fairfolk Friday. So today we're going to talk about the Red Cap. Here is the art for him. Their lore in general, as well as mostly what's recorded in the Field Guide of Little People, primarily comes from Scotland, but you will find a version of them in some way in a lot of your Gaelic and Brittonic areas. Now, they generally live in like something fortified, like castles no one lives in anymore, fortified towers, fortified homes. Yeah, especially with places that may have a history of violence. They are called red caps because that is what they use to color their hats. Human blood. And when that fades, they find new victims. They can also be a warning because they make a sound like beating flax when disaster is to come. So, now my family lore when it comes to red caps is very similar but a little more detailed. To us, the red caps are not a specific type of Fairfolk in the sense of, like, I guess you can call them races, but they're more of a faction. The way that we were taught is that they, for one reason or another, no longer have, I guess you can call them fey courts, as much as I don't necessarily like that word, but that is a word that I think people will recognize. And these are displaced in those courts for one reason or another. And usually, you know, they blame us. So that is why we are the victims of a lot of their activities. They are not ones to work with or purposely reach out to, and they will never purposely reach out. It's Fairfolk Friday again. Now, a lot of people know about red caps, but did you know blue caps are a thing? Your blue caps were, you know, mining Fairfolk. They legitimately worked in the mines. While they behaved in a similar fashion like brownies or your boobotches, they expected payment. But they did seem to be fair about it. They did a decent amount of work, as in they kept the structure of the mine safe. They would even, you know, pull some of the ore out themselves, and they only requested the payment of an average putter. Generally, their payment was left in a solitary corner of the mine. If it was too little, it was said that the blue cap would become indignant and possibly even malicious, and if it was too much, it would just leave the surplus where they found it. They appeared as blue flame around coal. Alright, today is Fairfolk Friday. We're going to open this book for the first time today. Ser Beck and Ser Baines, driving the Laird or Morphy stains. The Laird or Morphy will never thrive. Silang as the Kelpie is alive. So yes, today we are talking about the Scottish Kelpie. Kelpies, also known as water horses, can take primarily two forms, that of an attractive but rough and shaggy-looking human, or a young horse, and both of these forms they have a tendency to lure people into the water. And whether they are drowning them or transporting them to the other world is up to interpretation. They are also believed to eat victims they drown. They're also primarily only found by rivers, not by loches or the seas. If you see a water horse by the sea, run. That is a nope horse, and that is far worse. They howl in a unique way that is said to be a prelude to a storm is coming. There are also considerable legends that a Kelpie can be controlled in certain aspects. A man known as Wellox McGregor was known to take a bridle off a Kelpie. The Kelpie begged him to restore it. But instead, he kept it, and he used both the bridle and the Kelpie to do magic. Also, putting a bridle on a Kelpie is also said to subdue it to your will in some fashion. Specifically, a man known as Graham of Morphy once bridled a Kelpie and used it to drag stones to build his new castle. When the castle was built, he took off the bridle. After this, the Kelpie dashed into the water and cursed Graham's line. They faced misfortune until the end of their line. Kelpies are not beings to mess with in any fashion. Welcome to another Fairfolk Friday! Today we are going to learn about the Corrit. The Kored are a group of predominantly Celtic dancing dwarves, I think would be the best way to call them, because that is what they're heavily associated with. They are generally, well, as the name implies, short, dark hair, and red eyes. They are heavily associated with the standing stones that you can find across Celtic areas. In fact, it is said that the Kored carried them on their back. They have immense strength despite their small size. The Kored are predominantly found in Brittany, however you can also find them in Cornwall, as well as the Celtic areas of both France and Spain. As they are associated with the standing stones, you can find them in caves underneath them. Though apparently in recent times they have become more adventurous, and the younger Koreds have begun making homes in dunes, by the sea, as well as just in human population. They are said to know where all of the treasures in the area in which they reside are, and therefore can be helpful to some people. However, they have also been known to have adverse reactions to humans interacting with them. On Wednesdays, you can find Spriggans and many other types of Kored dancing, and if a human joins them, they have been known to retaliate in some fashion. If they are men, they will simply dance until exhaustion for daring to enter the circle, and if they are a woman, they have said that in 9 months' time, that woman will have a child with a lot of features of a man that woman never slept with. Such is the fate of any human who dares bring their foot stomping into their sacred dances. When not dancing, whether it be in their caves or wherever they choose to reside, they will always choose to live below sea level. It's possible to find an all-male society of Koreds in Glasgow, the Hams Cornus. Glasgow is in Spain, so I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Forgive me. Now, despite what I said earlier in this video, they can be cordial in some ways. Now, while not super friendly towards humans, people can borrow tools from them. And it has been said that they will also watch livestock as long as they get a little piece of the meat when it comes butchering time for the animals they watch over. The Kored come in many names, and are just in generally considered sacred, though definitely cautious to be around. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you come back next week, and I hope this video wasn't too long for anyone. It's Friday! Fairfolk time! Today we're going to talk about the Alvin, or the Dutch Elves. The Alvin are, while weak-looking creatures, are very powerful. Now, they also are sometimes said to have been invisible. However, it's also incredibly possible that they're just insubstantial to us. It's generally believed that they travel through, effectively, water or air pockets. They only seem to do this over long distances. Otherwise, you can see them gliding. Now, for the most part, where they would be traveling to are ponds. They generally live in ponds, especially in ponds without fish. They also just generally have a lot of control over a lot of sources of water. Specifically the river Elbe, forgive my pronunciation, Dutch folk. They are strongest at night, which is something they share with their favorite plants, nightwort and elfleaf. Thank you for watching, come back next week! I'm shirtless for today's Fairfolk Friday because I got a new tattoo and it still hurts to wear a shirt. Please don't let it be distracting. Now, when most people think Celtic house Fairfolk, they're probably going to think of the brownie, but others exist. On the Isle of Man, there exists a creature called the Archon Sunni, which is a small hedgehog-like creature. Now, while, yes, they can be found in the wild, if people are particularly kind to them, they become their own kind of household Fairfolk, known for doing chores and otherwise caring for families that care for them. They look like white hedgehogs with red eyes, and cannot change their shape, but they can change their size to being about the size of, well, a hedgehog, to the size of a decently large farm pig. While rare to see one in the wild, it's generally considered good luck. If you are able to catch one, you will likely find a silver coin in your pocket. It's Fairfolk Friday, and today we're going to learn about some French Fairfolk. Specifically, the Dames, or the Dames Vertes? I don't speak French, so I'm probably mispronouncing that. These are interesting creatures, often thought of as ghosts, but that would be a disservice. And I think they're called ghosts because they kind of seem to appear then disappear, when in reality they're kind of like visitors from the French realms of the Fairfolk. They used to live in forests and would draw men towards them, and then effectively both the power of their emotions in of themselves, as well as just their powers in general. Death by snoo snoo is probably the only way I can put it for TikTok. They're heavily associated with the winds, specifically winds near grains or orchards, because they're very powerful nature creatures. Thank you for watching. It's another Friday, and if you're a regular on my channel, you know today is Fairfolk Friday. Today, we're gonna talk about the Azrai. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I've only ever read about these. These are English Fairfolk heavily associated with the full moon. In fact, in certain areas such as Cheshire and Shropshire? I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong too. A full moon can be called an Azrai night. The Azrai are very shy, and on full moons they will come to the surface because they live deep underwater to marvel at the moon, and that, for the most part, is when you're gonna see them. The Azrai are all women, with the only differentiating thing about them from being just beautiful humans is long green hair and webbed feet, and the general lack of clothes. If a man sees them, they are likely to capture that man. Sunlight is also deadly to them.